In 1969, a young nun in Baltimore named Sister Cathy Cesnik vanished, and 2 months later, her body was found. She was only 26 years old, beloved by her students, and feared by those hiding dark secrets. For decades, her murder has remained unsolved, but whispers suggest she was silenced because she knew too much. This isn't just a story of a crime. It's a story of faith, betrayal, and one of America's most haunting mysteries. Baltimore, late 1960s, a city alive with change, but also weighed down by secrets. And within that city lived a young nun whose smile could melt the hardest heart. Her name was Cathy Cesnik, but almost everyone called her Sister Cathy. To her students, she was more than a teacher. To her fellow sisters, she was more than a nun. To her family, she was the golden one, the girl who seemed destined to make the world brighter. And that's exactly what she did. Cathy was born in 1942 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. From a young age, she stood out, bright, kind, curious about everything. She loved literature and music, but more than that, she loved people. She had a way of noticing others, of making them feel special. Her family remembered how, as a little girl, she would gather the neighborhood children, line them up, and teach them with her chalkboard. She wasn't playing school, she was practicing for the life she seemed destined to live. By her teenage years, Cathy felt a calling, a deep sense that her purpose in life was to serve. But unlike some who chose the religious path, Cathy's calling wasn't about retreating from the world. Hers was about embracing it. When she decided to join the School Sisters of Notre Dame, her parents weren't surprised. She had always been drawn to kindness, to faith, to helping others. And so, Cathy became Sister Cathy Cesnik. By the mid-1960s, Cathy was teaching at Archbishop Keele High School, an all-girls Catholic school in Baltimore, from her very first days in the classroom. It was clear she wasn't just another strict nun in black robes. She had a sparkle, a playfulness, a sense of humor that set her apart. She would greet her students warmly, remember their names instantly, and encourage even the shyest voices to be heard. Her students said later, she was the kind of teacher who didn't just stand at the blackboard. She walked among us. She wanted to know who we were, what we were feeling. When a girl was struggling at home, Cathy would notice. She would stay after class, sit side by side, and let the girl talk until the tears stopped. She became a safe place, a second mother. Even decades later, those women, now grandmothers, still choke up when they talk about her. She made us feel loved, one said, tears in her eyes. She made us believe we mattered. Sister Cathy was deeply devoted. But she wasn't rigid. She loved poetry. She loved Shakespeare. She wrote verses herself, often reflecting on faith and hope. She quoted Emily Dickinson in class, making the words come alive. She also loved music. Sometimes she would hum songs, or even play them for her students, weaving lessons into lyrics. And she had a mischievous sense of humor. Friends recall her playful smile, the way she could lighten any room with just a few words. She didn't see faith as rules and restrictions. She saw it as love, compassion, joy. By 1969, Cathy was 26 years old. She and her close friend, Sister Helen Russell, made a bold decision. They moved out of the convent and into a small apartment in Baltimore. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a choice to live closer to the community, to better understand the lives of the young women they taught. The apartment was modest. 2 young women, cooking meals, grading papers late into the night. sometimes laughing over cups of coffee. For Cathy, this independence was important. She was devoted to God, yes, but she was also human, curious, warm, eager to experience life in all its forms. Her students trusted her with everything: their first crushes, their family fights, their secret dreams. Cathy never judged. She listened. She encouraged. She told them they were capable of greatness, even when they didn't believe it themselves. One student recalled, "She looked you in the eye, and you felt like the only person in the world." That autumn should have been one of joy. Cathy was thriving as a teacher. Her students adored her. She was writing poetry, talking about perhaps pursuing more studies. But there was also something troubling beneath the surface. She had begun to notice things at Archbishop Keogh. Things that didn't feel right. Things involving the girls she loved so dearly. She confided in a few close friends that she might have to speak out, that she couldn't remain silent if harm was being done. She never gave details, but her voice was serious, her eyes troubled. Her friends would later recall that look, a look that suggested she knew too much, and that she was afraid. Despite whatever weighed on her heart, Cathy never let her students feel it. Every day, she walked into class with the same warmth, the same sparkle, the same open arms. To them, she was more than a nun, more than a teacher. She was family. And then, one November evening in 1969, Sister Cathy vanished. The woman who had dedicated her life to protecting others suddenly needed protection herself. Her students waited for her to walk back into class. Her family prayed for a phone call. Her friends searched the streets, hoping for a sign. But deep inside, everyone feared the truth. Something terrible had happened. And soon, Baltimore would learn just how dark that truth was. It was Friday evening, November 7th, 1969. Baltimore was quiet, the autumn chill already hinting at the winter to come. For most people, it was just another night. But for Sister Cathy Cesnik, it would be her last. That evening, Cathy told her roommate, Sister Helen Russell, that she was heading out to do a little shopping. She wanted to buy a gift for her sister's engagement. Cathy loved surprises, loved making people feel special. Around 7:30 p.m., she left their small apartment, smiling as always. She drove off in her green Opel Kadett, the car she adored. To anyone watching, it was nothing unusual. Just a young woman running errands on a Friday night. But Cathy never came home. At first, Sister Helen wasn't worried. Cathy was independent. After all, she often stayed out a little longer than expected. But as the night stretched on, worry crept in. Midnight came, then 1 a.m. The apartment was silent. No headlights in the driveway. No sound of Cathy's laughter. By morning, panic set in. Cathy was reliable, responsible. She wouldn't disappear without a word. Something was wrong. The next day, Cathy's car was found just a block and a half from her apartment. To the untrained eye, it looked ordinary. Parked neatly on the street, nothing broken, nothing stolen. But investigators, and those who knew her, noticed the details. The car wasn't where Cathy usually parked. It was too far from the building, as if someone else had left it there. Inside, there were packages, the very gifts she had gone out to buy, which meant she had made it to the store. She had shopped. She had driven home, but somewhere between the parking lot and her front door, she had vanished. Sister Helen was frantic. She contacted the police. She called Cathy's family. She prayed, hoping against hope that Cathy would walk back through the door with one of her warm, mischievous smiles. But Cathy never came. Her disappearance hit the school like a thunderclap. Archbishop Keogh High, word spread quickly. Sister Cathy is missing. Girls cried in the hallways. Teachers whispered in fear. Parents called, asking questions no one could answer. For the girls who adored her, it felt impossible. Their beloved teacher, their confidant, their second mother, gone without explanation. Baltimore. Police began their search. They questioned neighbors. They examined the car, but there were no signs of a struggle. No fingerprints of strangers. No blood. No broken glass. It was as if Cathy had simply disappeared. Her family begged for answers. Her fiancé, yes, Cathy had quietly been engaged, something only her closest friends knew, was devastated. He told police there was no way she would have left on her own. Days passed, then weeks. The November air grew colder. The leaves fell. Thanksgiving came and went. And still, no Sister Cathy. The girls at Keogh lit candles. They prayed in the chapel. Some swore they felt her presence in the halls. Others whispered that something terrible had happened. Something the church didn't want them to know. Baltimore was on edge. Then, on a frigid January day in 1970, nearly 2 months after she vanished, a discovery would be made on the outskirts of the city. A discovery so horrifying, so devastating, that it would shatter the hearts of everyone who loved her. Sister Cathy's disappearance was no longer a mystery of hope. It was now a mystery of murder. For nearly 2 months, Baltimore had lived with questions. Where was Sister Cathy? Was she alive? Would she return to her students, her family, her community? People clung to hope, even as days turned into weeks. Candles were lit, prayers whispered, tears shed in quiet corners. And then, on January 3rd, 1970, that fragile hope was destroyed. It was bitterly cold. The kind of winter day where the air bites your skin and the ground is hard as stone. 2 hunters were walking the outskirts of a desolate area near Lansdowne, just outside Baltimore. The land was quiet, covered in snow, broken only by patches of weeds and scattered trash. They weren't looking for anything unusual, just rabbits. Just game. But what they found instead would haunt them forever. As they moved through the brush, one of them spotted something unusual in the distance. Something pale against the brown earth. At first, they thought it was a mannequin, a doll, something discarded, but as they drew closer, the truth emerged. It was human. It was a woman. The body was badly decomposed, partially covered by leaves and debris. She had been left there, discarded like garbage, and even before the police arrived, the hunters knew. This was no ordinary woman. This was the missing nun everyone had been searching for. It was Sister Cathy. When detectives reached the scene, they confirmed the hunters' worst fears. The body was indeed that of 26-year-old Sister Cathy Cesnik. Her clothing matched what she'd been wearing the night she vanished. Her small frame, her features, even in death, were unmistakable. The medical examiner studied the remains. Cathy's skull had been fractured. She had been beaten, struck hard with a blunt object. Her killer had left her there, in the cold, to rot. Baltimore now had a murder on its hands. When the news reached Cathy's family, their world shattered. Her fiancé collapsed in tears. He had clung to the belief that she would come back to him, that their secret engagement would one day become a marriage. Her parents were inconsolable. No parent imagines burying their child, let alone in such a brutal way. And her students. The girls who adored her cried for days. Some refused to believe it. Others said they felt betrayed by God himself. One student whispered, "She was the best of us. If something like this could happen to her, then no one is safe." The city of Baltimore was shaken. Newspapers splashed the headlines across their front pages. Body of missing nun found in Lansdowne. Beloved teacher slain. For a city deeply tied to the Catholic Church, the loss was personal. Cathy had been a symbol of faith, kindness, and service. Her brutal death felt like an attack on the very soul of the community. Police scoured the crime scene. They searched for footprints, tire tracks, any clue that might reveal who had brought Cathy here, but the winter's snow had erased much of the evidence. And the weeks her body had lain exposed had taken their toll. Still, detectives vowed to find her killer. They questioned neighbors, students, family members. They looked into her recent movements, the shopping trip that ended in tragedy. Yet for every question answered, two more appeared. Why had her car been parked so close to her apartment? Why had she never made it inside? And most haunting of all, who wanted Cathy dead? In the weeks that followed, Baltimore mourned. Thousands attended her funeral. The church overflowed with students, teachers, friends, strangers. People wept openly. They clutched rosaries. They sang hymns through their tears. But even as the community grieved, a darker undercurrent was growing. Some of Cathy's closest students whispered that she had known something, that she had been afraid, that her murder wasn't random. And those whispers would not go away. Sister Cathy Cesnik had been found. But her story was far from over, because her murder wasn't just a tragedy. It was a doorway into secrets so dark, so shocking, that decades later they would still shake Baltimore to its core. Baltimore, January 1970. The body of Sister Cathy Cesnik had been found. The city was in shock. The church was in mourning. And the police were under pressure. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted justice. But as detectives dug deeper, they quickly realized this case was not going to be easy. Police began with the obvious. Who had last seen Cathy alive? Her roommate, Sister Helen, told them Cathy had gone out shopping around 7:30 that night. She had never come home. The car was parked neatly outside. The gifts she bought were still inside, which meant Cathy had been taken between her car and her apartment. Detectives suspected maybe a random attacker, a mugger, a drifter. Baltimore, after all, wasn't free of crime, but there was no robbery. Cathy still had her purse, her ring, her belongings. This wasn't a theft gone wrong. It was something else. Then came another revelation. Cathy, though a nun, had quietly been engaged to a man named Ed. It wasn't public knowledge. She had confided in only her closest friends. Could he have been involved? Investigators pressed him hard. But Ed was devastated by Cathy's death. His grief was raw, unshakable. And there was no evidence linking him to her murder. He was cleared. Detectives looked at Cathy's Opel Kadett. Why was it parked so strangely? Why not closer to the apartment? Some neighbors said they hadn't noticed anything unusual. Others claimed they saw the car arrive late that night, hours after Cathy should have been home. One witness insisted a dark sedan was seen behind Cathy's car. Another swore they saw a man inside. But the descriptions were vague, conflicting. The leads fizzled. Weeks turned into months. Detectives interviewed dozens of people. They followed every tip. They searched wooded areas, questioned possible suspects. and even looked into Cathy's teaching job. But every trail ended in a dead end. By spring, the investigation had slowed to a crawl. The police had no murder weapon, no clear suspect, no motive. The city that had once demanded justice began to move on. But Cathy's family and students never did. Even as the police case went cold, whispers grew louder. Some of Cathy's students claimed she had confided in them, that she knew about things happening at Archbishop Keogh High School. Things dark, things terrible. They said Cathy had been planning to expose it, that she wanted to protect her girls. And that, perhaps, was why she had been silenced. At the time, these were just rumors, unproven, unspoken in public. But decades later, those whispers would roar back with shocking force. By late 1970, newspapers had stopped running stories about Sister Cathy. The headlines faded. Other crimes filled the pages. To outsiders, it was just another unsolved murder. But to those who loved her, her family, her students, her community, it was a wound that would never heal. They prayed. They lit candles. They begged God for answers. And all the while, the truth remained hidden. For more than 20 years, the murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik stayed a cold case. But in the 1990s, a series of shocking allegations against the Catholic Church would bring her name back into the headlines. And suddenly, people began to wonder, had Sister Cathy been murdered? Not by chance, but by design? Had she died because she knew too much? For more than 20 years, the murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik had been a cold case. Her students had grown up, started families. Her parents had aged, carrying grief they never put into words. The church had carried on as if nothing had happened. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. And in the 1990s, it did, with explosive force. In the early 90s, a former student of Archbishop Keogh High School, Jane Wenner, known then as Jane Doe, came forward with horrifying allegations. She said that while she was a student at Keogh, she had been abused. Not just once, not just by one person, but systematically over years. And the man at the center of it all? Father Joseph Maskell, the school chaplain. Maskell was supposed to be a counselor, a spiritual guide. But according to Jane, and later, many other students, he used that role to prey on vulnerable young girls. Jane described being called to Maskell's office for counseling. Instead, she said, she was subjected to repeated abuse. And it wasn't just Maskell. She claimed he brought in others, sometimes other men from the community, even police officers, to assault her. It was a web of corruption, protected by silence and fear. The girls said they had been too scared to tell anyone. When they did, they were ignored, shamed, or threatened. For decades, the secret had stayed buried. But now, the truth was spilling out. Then came the detail that shook Baltimore to its core. Jane Wenner said that during her time at Keogh, she had confided in Sister Cathy. She trusted Cathy more than anyone. And Cathy, being who she was, listened. She believed her. She promised to protect her. Zhang believed Cathy was preparing to expose the abuse, to stand up against Maskell and anyone else hurting her students. And then, Cathy vanished, but Zhang revealed something even more chilling. She claimed that shortly after Cathy's disappearance, Father Maskell had taken her to see something. He drove her to a remote area. He opened the car door. And there, Zhang said, she saw the lifeless body of Sister Cathy Cesnik, her face bruised, her body broken. Maskell allegedly leaned in close and whispered, "See what happens when you say bad things about people." It was a warning, a threat. A message that if the girls dared to speak out, they too could end up like Sister Cathy. When these allegations surfaced in the 90s, Baltimore erupted. How could this have been hidden for so long? How could a priest, a man of God, have gotten away with such evil? And was Sister Cathy murdered to keep the secret buried? The answers seemed obvious to many, but proving them was another matter. Police reopened the case. They questioned Maskell. They questioned former students, but years had passed. Evidence was thin. Memories had blurred. Maskell, of course, denied everything. He claimed the women were lying, inventing stories. The church largely stood by him. No charges were ever filed against him for Cathy's murder. And so, once again, justice slipped away. Still, the damage was done. The allegations had lifted a veil, exposing a culture of silence and abuse within the church. Survivors began speaking out, not just in Baltimore, but across the country. Sister Cathy's name became a symbol, not only of an unsolved murder, but of the cost of silence, of the lives shattered by secrets. By the late 1990s, Father Maskell had fled the country, only to return years later. He would die in 2001, never charged with Cathy's murder, never held accountable for the abuse he was accused of. But the whispers never stopped. To this day, survivors insist Cathy died because she was ready to protect them, because she was brave enough to tell the truth. And if that's true, then her murder wasn't random. It was a cover-up, a silencing, and the church, knowingly or not, may have played a part. By the mid-1990s, the whispers around Baltimore had turned into voices, one by one. Women who had once been students at Archbishop Keough High School stepped forward. They told stories no one wanted to believe. Stories of betrayal. Stories of stolen innocence. And at the center of those stories was Father Joseph Maskell. For decades, these women had carried their pain in silence. Many had never even told their husbands, their families, or their closest friends, but now, with courage they could barely find words for, they began to speak. Zhang Wenner, the student who had confided in Sister Cathy, described the threats, the manipulation, the nightmarish warning when she was shown Cathy's dead body. Another woman said, Maskell used the confessional booth, the very place meant for forgiveness, as a weapon, twisting her secrets against her. Yet another claimed local police officers were sometimes present during the abuse, suggesting the cover-up was bigger than anyone dared to imagine. Each testimony was chilling. Each one added weight to the belief that Cathy had been silenced because she knew too much. For the survivors, speaking out wasn't easy. Some broke down mid-sentence, haunted by memories. Others trembled as they spoke, the fear still living in their bones. Even 30 years later, they had lived through failed marriages, addictions, sleepless nights, and decades of guilt. Many of them said, if Sister Cathy had lived, maybe our lives would have been different. Maybe she could have saved us. And that's the tragedy. Cathy wanted to protect them. She tried. And in trying, she may have paid with her life. In 2001, Joseph Maskell died. To the survivors, his death brought mixed emotions. On one hand, there was relief. The man they feared could never hurt anyone again. On the other, there was rage. Because he had never faced trial, never confessed, never been forced to answer for the devastation he left behind. Maskell was buried quietly, his secrets buried with him, but the wounds he left remained wide open. For Baltimore, for the church, and for the families of Sister Cathy and her students, there was no closure. Cathy's parents died without ever knowing who killed their daughter. Her fiancé lived his life in quiet grief, carrying the ghost of the woman he loved. And the survivors, those brave women, continued their fight. They became advocates, speaking out not just for themselves, but for victims everywhere. Every time they told their stories, they brought Cathy's name with them. They reminded the world that she was more than a victim. She was a protector, a hero who gave her life trying to defend others. Today, decades after her death, Sister Cathy Cesnik's memory lives on. Her former students still call her their second mother. They keep her picture, her poetry, her words close to their hearts. For them, she's not just a murder victim. She is a symbol of courage, a symbol of the cost of silence, and a reminder that sometimes the brightest lights are the ones the world tries hardest to extinguish. The official case of Sister Cathy Cesnik's murder remains unsolved, but those who knew her, those who loved her, and those who survived the horrors she tried to stop, they believe they know the truth. They believe Cathy was silenced. They believe Maskell was at the center of it. And they believe justice, even decades later, is still possible. But the question that lingers is this: will the truth ever truly come out? Decades had passed since the cold winter of 1969, when Sister Cathy Cesnik disappeared and was later found murdered. But time, instead of healing the wound, had only made it deeper. Because the truth never came. Because justice never arrived. And yet, Cathy's story refused to be forgotten. In 2017, nearly 50 years after Cathy's death, the world finally heard her story again. This time through a groundbreaking Netflix documentary called The Keepers. The series brought Cathy's life, her murder, and the abuse scandal at Keio High School into the global spotlight. Millions watched. Millions wept. For many, it was the first time they learned of Cathy. For others, it was a chance to finally speak her name aloud, to demand justice after half a century of silence. The documentary didn't solve her murder, but it did something almost as powerful. It gave Cathy back her voice. After The Keepers aired, viewers across the world were outraged. How could a young nun, loved by all, vanish and be murdered, and for decades no one held accountable? How could the allegations of so many young women be ignored? How could the church remain silent? The story spread far beyond Baltimore. It became a symbol of institutional cover-ups, of the dangers of silence, and of the desperate need for accountability. For her former students, Cathy remains their guiding light. They still speak of her kindness, her poetry, her laughter. Many say they live differently because of her, carrying forward the compassion she showed them as teenagers. For survivors of abuse, Cathy is a symbol of protection, a woman who saw their pain and tried to stand up for them, even when it cost her life. And for the wider world, her story is a chilling reminder: silence protects abusers, not victims. Despite renewed attention, Cathy's murder remains unsolved. DNA testing in the 2000s and 2010s offered no definitive answers. Father Maskell died without confessing. Other potential suspects faded into history. To this day, no one has been charged. And yet, those who knew her insist they know why she died. They believe she discovered the truth about what was happening at Keio. They believe she intended to expose it. And they believe that was why she was silenced. The murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik is not just a Baltimore story. It's an American story. It embodies themes of faith, betrayal, justice denied, and courage in the face of evil. It forces us to ask, What would we have done if we were in her shoes? Would we have had the courage to speak out? And would we have been ready to pay the price? Sister Cathy was only 26 years old. A teacher, a poet, a woman of faith. She should have lived a long life, filled with laughter, family, and more classrooms, of girls who adored her. Instead, she became a martyr of silence, and yet, even in death, she continues to teach. Her life continues to inspire. Her story continues to demand justice. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons don't come from textbooks or classrooms. They come from courage, from sacrifice, from love. And in that way, Sister Cathy Cesnik is still teaching us all.